All right, so if the rumors of the NX are true, and that's a big if because it's not confirmed. It's not confirmed, but if rumors of the NX are indeed true, and if Nintendo really is tipping its hat back into the high-end graphics game, Sony and Microsoft are in trouble. And the reason why they're in trouble if this happens is because this is the nitpick generation. Gamers have never been more nitpicky than this generation. Everybody's running around with their Sherlock Holmes magnifying glasses. Oh, what the 900p, 1080p? I can't buy that 900p garbage, even though you don't even have the other system. No generation has ever been as nitpicky as this generation. And the real funny part is a lot of these differences in multiplats were just as big, if not bigger, last generation, and nobody really cared. You guys could nitpick and stuff over, like, say, like a Call of Duty port. Oh, it's 900p on the Xbox One, it's 1080p on the PlayStation 4. What a huge difference. But the funny part is, you could take a game like the original Black Ops on the PlayStation 3 that was actually missing not just a lower resolution in the 360 version, but actually missing freaking textures. Missing textures. But nobody made a big stink about that because this is the picky, nitpicking generation. Now, the reason why I say that Sony and Microsoft could be in trouble if Nintendo's dropping his hat back into the tech game is because of how nitpicky niggas are right now. Now, if they come out with a system, let's say that they come out with a system that's pretty much as powerful as they could release it next year or 2017 for $300 or $300 or so. That could be quite a bit more powerful than the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One. Now, if you're seeing how nitpicky niggas are being over these small details, imagine the reaction if games on the NX or ports on the NX look noticeably better. Now, I'm not saying how it is now where someone pretty much has to tell you why it looks better. I'm saying if you see the NX version, you see the PlayStation 4 version or Xbox One version, you immediately know which one's the NX version because it looks noticeably better. That's what I'm talking about. If that happens, they're in trouble. And another reason why they would be in trouble is because Nintendo has shown in the past that they are very capable of either doing more with less or doing more for less money. Now, that could be said about the Wii or the Wii U because both systems were able to do things that technically on paper they shouldn't have been able to do. But I'm not talking about the Wii generation. I'm talking about the generations before that. If we go all the way back to the 16-bit era, you talk to anyone during that era or anyone that didn't even witness the era and just faking it. Super Nintendo, it had hands down the best looking games, right? Well, the funny part about all of that is how they got there. Now, everyone does spec comparisons and stuff nowadays because it's the thing to do, even though the doctor's been doing it forever. And the funny part is that if you actually look at the specs, even though the Sega Genesis came out about 2 years before the Super Nintendo, its CPU is clocked twice as fast. Yet the Super Nintendo is a system that ended up with the better looking games. And you might want to ask yourself, how did they achieve that? Well, one, Nintendo seems like they looked at what would make the biggest difference visually for the average gamer. Now, games that were high paced, such as sports games and Sonic the Hedgehog games and stuff like that, ran much better on the Super Nintendo. Ran much better on the Genesis because the CPU was a lot faster. But for the large majority of games, that CPU speed didn't really matter because a lot of the other games were slower paced. What Nintendo did was make sure that the Super Nintendo could display way more colors than the Sega Genesis, which was evident, and also more and larger sprites. Another thing that they also did was they actually had graphics accelerator chips inside the freaking cartridges, which is probably one of the reasons why Super Nintendo games on average actually cost about $10 more than the same Sega Genesis game. Either that or Nintendo was just trying to get some more money. But I think the added chips inside the cartridges had a lot to do with that. At least where I grew up, the average Sega Genesis game was anywhere from $59 to anywhere from $54.99 to $64.99. Super Nintendo games were $64.99 to $74.99 on average. And then there were some games like Final Fantasy that were like closer to $80. So Super Nintendo games cost more than Genesis titles. And as you can see there, Nintendo simply outsmarted Sega. When Sega tried to get in on the accelerated graphics chip cartridges game, it was too late. They got caught with their pants down. And they couldn't do it for cheap. They released virtual racing on the Sega Genesis, and they had to sell the game for $100. Nobody bought that. It's a $100 Sega Genesis game. That's not going to work. So they pretty much got outsmarted by Nintendo. Then we move on to the N64. Now, the N64 was originally supposed to launch in 1995, got delayed a year to 96. The original PlayStation and Sega Saturn were selling for $299. Now, the N64 was a lot more powerful than both those systems and launched at $199. Nintendo, with a system more powerful than the competition, actually forced the competition to lower their prices by $100 a piece. And they did that right before, I think it was a couple months before the N64 launched. So that right there, they're showing you that Nintendo, when they want to do graphics, they can do it better and smarter than the competition. So then we move on to the next generation, PlayStation 2, GameCube, and Xbox. Now, there's a reason why the GameCube is and was considered a technical marvel, because it was just that. It was small, it was cheap, and it was powerful. GameCube was $100 cheaper than the competition. Now, that also could have been because it didn't have a DVD player, but even if it had a DVD player and was $100 more, that doesn't change the fact that the GameCube still had the most taxing games of that generation. While Sony and Microsoft were over there talking about giving out raw polygon numbers, talking about, oh yeah, the Xbox can do 100 million polygons per second. Oh, the PlayStation 2 can do 75 million polygons per second. And also, the funny part is, when they give out raw numbers for polygons, when they were given out, does not include gameplay, sound, or even colors. So that means those systems can't do anywhere close to that. Now, Nintendo, on the other hand, gave numbers for what any developer, regardless of skill, could achieve on the GameCube. And they said 6 to 12 million polygons per second. And they were being modest because Rogue Leader, a launch game for the GameCube that was made in 9 months by Factor 5, was, 15 million plus per second at 60 frames per second. And the funny part is, to this day, no PlayStation or original Xbox game comes close to those benchmarks. And then Rebel Strike came out and was even more taxing than that game. So we have 3 generations in a row where Nintendo just completely outsmarted the competition graphically. If you look again at the GameCube, Microsoft saw what Nintendo did with the GameCube and went to AMD and IBM and pretty much said, okay, give us a 2005 GameCube. Because if you look, they ditched all of their partners and went with the same exact partners as Nintendo. They ditched Intel, they ditched Nvidia, went with IBM and AMD, just like Nintendo's. Nintendo can be a graphical beast if they want to, but that's just the point. It's all a matter of if they want to or not. We'll see.